this is Chef Chip from riceandgravy.com, back again with another great recipe, Cajun sausage. Well, sorta. We are going to make Cajun sausage today, but the purpose of this video is to teach you the basics of making sausage, any kind of sausage. I've been a hobby sausage maker for almost 10 years, and it is one of my favorite activities in the kitchen. I usually try to keep my videos short and sweet, but for the sake of important detail, I am going to take a little extra time with this one. So, let's get started. We'll start with this whole pork butt, which actually comes from the shoulder of the animal. Go figure. The shoulder has a perfect ratio of flesh to fat for sausage making, and so I'm not going to waste any of my time trimming any of it off. Preparing the meat involves first breaking it down into smaller pieces, then seasoning it, and then we'll put it through the grinder. Right at the beginning here, I want to stress the most important part of sausage making that should predicate all of your activities, and that is temperature control. The obvious reason for temperature control is safe food handling, and we all know the importance of that, but in sausage making, temperature plays another very important role. Fat is one of the most important ingredients in sausage, as the ratio of fat will determine moisture and texture of the final product on your plate. Fat softens as it warms up and will smear into the meat and make a very unattractive final product. Took about 10 minutes to process this meat, and it is already up to 46 degrees. So let's get it back in the fridge and we'll find something else to do for the next few hours. While we're waiting for the meat to chill, let's get the seasoning mix done. I have two ingredients that I want to talk about. The first one is buttermilk powder. You may find some sausage recipes called for powdered milk. This is to help bind the meat so it holds together well. I've found I prefer buttermilk powder. The acidity of the buttermilk gives my sausage an amazing texture. The other ingredient is curing salt, which is sodium nitrate. Meats cannot be safely cured without this stuff. Producers of so-called nitrate-free bacon, sausage, and deli meats use celery juice instead, which is naturally very high in sodium nitrate. So, if you fear nitrate, please, by all means, stop eating celery. That being said, curing salt is completely optional in this recipe because we're not going to cure it. I'm using it here because curing salt helps to preserve the natural color of the meat. For my Cajun sausage, I add coarse salt, paprika, marjoram, thyme, sage, coarsely ground black pepper, cayenne flakes, just a touch of sugar, and just a little of the curing salt. And here's my buttermilk powder. And the most important ingredient of all in Cajun sausage, fresh garlic. We'll put all these ingredients in the food processor so we can grind the garlic and combine the ingredients at the same time. See how pasty that is? The buttermilk powder does that. And now that the meat is back in the right temperature range, let's mix the seasoning in. It's a lot easier to mix the seasoning in at this stage than after the meat is ground, so this is an important step. Work from the bottom to the top and around the sides. Spending time on this step will ensure evenly seasoned sausage. And back in the fridge it goes. The next step will be to grind the meat. You can spend hundreds on a good grinder, but unless you're making more than 30 pounds of sausage at a time, I don't feel like any of those are necessary. I have a good KitchenAid mixer, and this is the food grinding attachment. I can grind 15 to 20 pounds of meat in less than 5 minutes with this thing. The grinding plates on the right came with the attachment. I bought the two on the left separately for coarser grinds. And actually, since I made this video, I found a new source that makes plates with even larger holes and even a special blade with a wider diameter. I've used them since I shot this video, and I like them even better than the ones you'll see me use here. I'll provide links on my blog site and in the description below. Assembly is very simple. The worm gear goes in like so. Next, the blade, which fits over the square on the end of the worm gear, keeps the blade from spinning freely. And then the grinding plate, and everything is held in place by the cap. I really wish I could show you my new blade and plates in action. That'll have to be another video. And then it gets attached to the mixer and it is ready to go. You can see here how the blade turns against the plate. Alright, let's grind it up. You'll see here in a second the meat goes in at the top and is pushed through the business end on the other side. And the seasoning is very evenly distributed. That was a whole lot easier than mixing after the ground. Also at this stage, I'm looking to see that the fat isn't smeared into the meat. You can see the fat as clearly separate from the meat. Always make a test patty to check for seasoning, because once it's stuffed, there ain't no turning back. And you can see it's browned really nicely. The sugar we added helps with that. All right, and here is the cook's treat. Oh yeah, Beb, that's a pass. Very nice. And say hello to Big Red. This is my stuffer. I highly recommend spending some money on a good stuffer. They can run anywhere from a couple $100 like this one all the way into the thousands for high capacity pneumatic. Mine here is oriented horizontally, which I don't recommend because it can't be operated without a second person. The vertical stuffers are much easier to work with. But the operation is the same. You turn the crank, which forces the piston into the cylinder, which pushes the meat out on the other end, into the casing. The horn attaches on this end, on which the casing is loaded. As the meat comes through, it's fed through the casing. With a machine like this, you can stuff 20 pounds of sausage in like 15-20 minutes or even less, depending on your skill. Before loading the meat in the cylinder, I like to put a little plastic or parchment on this end so the meat isn't exposed. And adding a little cooking oil as a lubricant takes a little effort out of the stuffing. When you pack the meat in the cylinder, work in small handfuls and ensure there are no air pockets. The air will end up in your sausage. This stuffer holds almost exactly 10 pounds. Pack the meat all the way up to the top, and I like to cover this end with plastic too because this is going back in the fridge while we prepare the casings. I use natural casing. It comes packed in salt to preserve it, and the salt needs to come off. Many processors just rinse it off. I prefer this added step of cleaning out the inside also because, well, I know where natural casings come from. Collagen casings are a synthetic product manufactured from collagen extracted from other parts of the animal. I've never worked with it, but I understand it's a lot easier to work with than what I have here. I also soak the casing in vinegar. I've been told that it makes the casing a little firmer, so it's less likely to burst during stuffing. It also seems to make the casing clear, giving the sausage a better appearance. Feeding the casing onto the horn is a real pain. I've always wondered just how much easier collagen casings might be. I'm going to load this with about 20 feet of casing, which should be more than enough to stuff my 16 pounds of sausage. If you're not going to go straight to stuffing, it's important to keep the casing from drying out by soaking it in clean water and then keeping it in the fridge until you're ready. Okay, so here we are. The cylinder is back in the stuffer, the horn is installed, and I've got my son on the gear side cranking while I'm here on the business end. This step isn't necessary, but I like to put an overhand knot on the end. It's just an extra guarantee the meat doesn't come out the other end of the casing. It's important to keep a good pace going. If your partner cranks too fast, the casing may burst under the pressure. Just find a pace that's fast enough just to get the job done. I'm using my left hand to control the sausage, and I'm applying just a little pressure with my right hand. With my right hand, I can slow the feed of the casing, which will result in a fuller sausage. But if you slow it too much, you'll overstuff and it'll burst. With your left hand, you can control the sausage into a circle so it doesn't kink or slide off the table. Especially when you're inexperienced, it's inevitable that the sausage is going to burst. This is actually very easily fixed. Simply pinch off on both sides of the break and squeeze the meat out. You can pack that meat back in the stuffer and put it through again. Once the sausage is all stuffed, it needs to be twisted into links. This was a process I never really understood from reading books, so I'll take a little time here to show you how it's done. Using both hands, select a length of your sausage and gently work a pinch into the casing with your fingers. These will be the breaks where you'll twist the link. It takes a little finesse, and it's easier to do when the sausage is still wet. You can see with both hands twisting the same way, I'm actually getting an opposing twist on either side. Then when I move to the next section and do the same thing, I'm not undoing my last twist. And we're almost done. The next step is to remove air pockets. Very easy to do with anything narrow and sharp. A toothpick works great, and you just throw it away when you're done. And the next step is packaging. Very important. It would be a darn shame after we went to all this effort to do a shoddy job of packaging. Here I've separated the links and put them together 3 to a pound. I like to get a partial freeze on mine so the sausage keeps its shape when I vacuum seal them. I also want to show you right here is where I had a link burst after I was done stuffing. This happens once in a while and I just freeze it like that. It's easy enough to cook it before it falls apart. You can also just squeeze the meat out of the burst ones and cook it up with some day-old rice and have it with your morning eggs. And here is the finished product. Man, ain't that pretty. Alright, let's say we fire up that grill and cook some of these guys. Because this is fresh sausage, it's a good idea to simmer the sausage for just a few minutes to firm up the casing. It'll be less likely to break on the grill. Man, don't you wish you were in my kitchen right now? Nope, too bad for you. Oh boy, that looks really good. Let's taste. Oh yeah. You know, there's a distinct difference between national brands and homemade. It's in the texture. This is firmer and more flavorful than the hot dog-like texture of mass-produced products. See the color inside? That little bit of curing salt I added earlier kept the meat beautiful pink color. This is amazing. You just can't even imagine. So there you have it. My purpose was to give a detailed tutorial on the basics of homemade sausage. I hope this video achieved that for you. Please visit my blog for all the recipe details as well as links to equipment sources. Bon appétit, à la prochaine!